Welcome back to another episode of HazeY Headed. Today I'm going to talk about a complex emotion, one that I've been feeling very strongly recently. I'm Evan Brandt, and this is Envious Thinking. So why did I want to make an episode like this? Well, I wanted to do this because I think it's something we commonly all deal with, especially if you're going for a goal. Let's take this back to when I was a wee lad, just a wee lad back in middle school. And I cared so much. That actually might have been like fifth grade, but I cared so much about Cub Scouts. I ended up being an Eagle Scout, hip hip hooray. So I got there. But I remember when I was a youngin', there was this kid who he was also in Scouts with me, and he just was killing it. He was getting all his scouting information together. He was attending meetings all the time. He was getting his badges quicker than me. And in my mind, I can remember this. This was the first encounter with envy, jealousy, those kind of complex emotions. And I just remember I was crying in my bed because he ranked up quicker than me. And the amount of disgust I had from just being a little kid, that was my first encounter with jealousy. And obviously, as time goes on, it becomes more and more complex. You're not crying in your bed anymore, but you sure definitely feel those feelings as an adult. And for me, especially recently, when it comes to getting my job, creating content, it is so easy to feel like you're behind. I mean, I'll just be candid. When it comes to my short form content, which I talk about cognitive biases and just different psychological concepts that kind of help me. What I've realized is I've worked so hard to get to 150 followers. And I remember when I was under 100 followers and I was posting every day, multiple times a day, putting all my effort in creating a strong message. And I was like, oh, only if I had 100 followers. And then I gained a little traction and got to 150. And then it's like, well, I only have 150 followers, but I see this guy who's doing content who's got way more than me. And he just has this untapped, he just has so much charisma. And I'm over here like, oh, what am I doing wrong? And the feeling is harsh because you're putting all your effort into something. And that envy is kind of your brain not giving yourself any justice. You're not realizing how far you've come to that point and knowing that you're not going to stop. So what's the point of worrying about it? Now let's fast forward. I just told you a story about when I was little. That was my first run-in with envy. Now let's go to high school. One of the worst feelings of envy and jealousy was when I got my girlfriend. And she would say she had a boyfriend prior. I never liked the fucking prick. Curly-headed fucktard. He's just a prick. But I was so envious because at the time, my young mind couldn't comprehend that a girl could love someone else after being with someone. Just kind of that young, rigid thinking of, oh, she's used property. She's not as valuable as she was because I'm getting his sloppy seconds and just real immature. Obviously, I was a high schooler, so you think of dumb stuff like that. But I remember it really affecting me very negatively. It hurt my self-esteem. I was a high performer in tennis. I was well-liked amongst my peers. I wasn't popular, but I was definitely a respected individual. And I just remember being consumed by that when, whatever that may have been, junior year, senior year of high school, something like that. And that was my first big boy encounter with envy and jealousy. And I just remember, this is going to be really candid, but I just remember thinking oh, he probably has a bigger dick than me. He probably is much smarter than me. All these things that didn't even fucking matter, And I just remember being so down on myself. I I'm not worthy of love. Like, it was almost like, oh, I'm not, if he can have her, what kind of worthiness, some backwards ass thinking like that. Like, okay, he's better than me. All these things, smarter, bigger dick, fucking better in school, better. And it's not even true, because it was all imaginary. And that's the kind of the evil thing about jealousy and envy, is that it's all a fragment of your imagination. But then once you go down that rabbit hole where you are comparing, everyone knows that, or you should know. So hopefully I'm introducing you, if you haven't heard this, to an amazing concept that comparison is the thief of joy. And that is so true, because once you go down that rabbit hole of feeling that way, it just becomes a perpetual loop. It becomes a cycle. You compare someone for this, like in sports, when I was in that mode of comparing myself to my girlfriend's previous boyfriend, it would spawn in other ways, through sports. I would be like, this guy is so much better than me at tennis, and all these ridiculous notions. And I've come a long way. Obviously, I was younger, 24 now, and I have a complete kind of control on my autonomy to an extent. I was watching Theo Von's podcast the other day. When I first started HazeY Headed, I used to not watch any podcasts, but now that I do, I think it's helped me with my pacing and my messaging. So just a little side note there. But he had the guy who's from Nelk Boys, he had him on his podcast on this past weekend with Theo Von, and he was just saying how he's in Forbes 30 under 30 or whatever that is, like all these things. And he was saying how he went to LA and he just sent it with no money, and he made it all work out. And I was like, I looked at myself, and my branding is a lot more philosophically grounded, much more self-aware, much more not as entertainment, like shock value entertainment. So when that happened, when he was talking about that feeling kind of crept back in, where I was like, dude, he got to work at such a young age, and what the hell? Like, he just had so much more ambition. He was talking about how he was a hometown hero back in Canada. And I'm like, damn, it would be cool to be a hometown hero back home. Not in a weird self-righteous way, but just being someone that they can say, man, I look up to him. That's what I want. I just want that, because then that feeling is contagious, and then many people grow. And who knows, maybe if you listen to the podcast, you get a little bit of that, and I hope you do. But that feeling of just sitting there like, wow, this I'm not worthy of that, or how is he more worthy than me? And then that perpetual loop starts where you're like comparing yourself, and then it creeps over. Well, damn, there's people that have blown up on social media for doing it for 3 months or, 2 months, or even, God forbid, a week, and they just make it seem so easy. And I'm here grinding. I'm here pushing ideas that I hold true to my values. And I really do believe that if I can impact one person, I that's all that matters. But just to know that I feel in my mind that I could be doing more, that's where that envy comes in. That's where the kind of self-hatred starts brewing. And you can all relate to this, because let's say at work, that high performer that is you're just like, wow, this person's got it all. He's got the personality, he's got the charisma, he's got all these qualities that I lack. And high performing people kind of put a mirror up to you and kind of make you look at yourself. And if it's going to expose some insecurity. So that's why you can only look at your path and your journey. And it's been said a million times, but it should be said a million more times, because when you objectively look at your situation, if you're someone that's in a growth part in your life, or maybe you aren't even in a growth part, but if you can look back and see how far you've come, or let's say you've even descended, let's say you fucked it all up and you're in a spot where you have no respect for yourself whatsoever, you can look back to when you were good or when you were performing well and know that that can come back. And what you don't realize is other people's journey. Like, you look at some of the most successful late bloomers in life. You look at Robert Downey Jr. with his addiction and his past, and then he becomes the perfect fit for Iron Man. You need to be patient with yourself and make yourself understand that the only battle you have is with yourself yesterday. And then if you can stack that kind of competitive spirit with yourself and you just tighten the sails and you say, look, I don't care about anybody else, and I can just look at me. Am I just even a little bit better? Did I eat a little less junk today than I did yesterday? Did I beat my dick one time less than yesterday? Just those, that's a little silly, but you get my point. So I think what helps me so much when I get into those envious states is knowing that 5 years from now, I'm going to look back and be like, my God, Evan at 24, I'm almost 30 now. Evan at 24 didn't know what the fuck he was talking about. But one thing I can respect from him is that he was working hard towards something. So, a lot of times fantasy can just eliminate so much self-doubt and so much self-hatred. And what do I mean by that? Fantasy, a lot of people call it delusional thinking. They call, in the self-help space, that's what they call be delusional with your goals. And I agree with that to an extent, but there's a caveat. If you are delusional towards your goals and you're just stuck in the planning phase or not doing anything, then you're just going to get the same feeling of reward without anything. So if you can stay in that delusional state where you're just like, man, I can just envision how much better I'm going to be in 5 years. Well, then do some things that dude would do, And one thing, this is circling back. When you are envious, you are taking your power completely away from yourself, because then you are spiteful, especially if you're in a creative field or, even any sort of field, a financial field, any job. If you are trying to become the best at it, you will take all that power away from yourself because you're saying he's got it and I don't. And then what that really does is it makes you think, whether you realize you're doing it or not, it makes you think, oh, I don't have that ability to do that. But when you look back at the person you started out with and you see that you are progressing, you think to yourself, man, I can do this because yesterday I wasn't able to do this. 3 weeks ago, I didn't even know how to record properly. 2 years ago, I cussed and mumbled over all my words every second. And now you're like, wow, wait a second. My message is getting clearer. I'm getting a little better with this detail and that detail. And then it's like a little bit of a Picasso work, but it's work. Your life is the canvas and you're just adding little details that make it better, And it's so cool to get into that moment when you can be proud of how much you've done. And when you get in that envious state, just bring it back to yourself. If you can say, okay, even if you're in a rut, if you can say, well, this is part of my journey, this setback doesn't define me. Always using that delusional thinking as forward thinking. Like, okay, what will 5 year from now me say? And I think he'd be proud of you for sticking with it, even when there's nothing going good. I think if you can tap into that, you'll be in a really good spot. So look forward towards tomorrow with positivity. Don't compare your journey to others. Be patient with yourself. And most importantly, live your life. Love your life. And if you don't love your life, find reasons to. Thank you for listening. And I hope you guys have an amazing day. Please follow my Instagram. DM me if you ever have any questions. I love talking to people. And yes, peace out.